Now, after I did a video on the strongest, biggest, and baddest moblins seen in the entire Zelda franchise, a lot of people wanted me to do more videos like that. Now, if you don't get what I'm talking about, I did a similar video to this one, but on the moblins. You can find it in the upper right corner, so you can watch it after this video. But after people said that, I was like, that's actually quite a good idea. So in this one, we will take a look at an enemy known as the Moblin, who are certainly similar in a way to the moblins, but certainly aren't the same. And today, we will find the strongest of their kind, because there's one of them that's certainly the most powerful. Now let's begin with taking a look at the Moblins, because what kind of creatures are they even? Well, they are among the most common enemies seen throughout the franchise, just like the moblins. Both of them are seen a lot in Ganondorf's army. Early in the series, they kind of looked like some sort of bulldog, but beginning in A Link to the Past, they started to look more and more like pigs or goblin-like creatures. And that kind of changed constantly, so I'm not really sure what kind of creature they are supposed to be even. Now, they are usually depicted carrying spears or javelins as their main weapon, and are found a lot in forests, but also occasionally inside mountains and dungeons. And when we look at the different versions seen in older and more modern games, we do see one big difference between the two. In the 2D Zelda games, moblins are often depicted as common foot soldiers encountered early in the game, while in the 3D titles they are often depicted as elite enemies capable of performing powerful attacks who may engage in full-on combat with you, where you seriously need to pay attention. So as you can imagine, the 3D versions will dominate this video, and because of that, I will promise you now, I won't forget about those 2D ones. Now in the games, we have also seen them use some other weapons like clubs and bows, so at the end of the day, they aren't limited to stuff like spears. However, now that we have an idea what these creatures even are, we can start looking at specific versions. I've looked at a lot of them, all of them to be honest, and there were a couple that fell out of the race immediately, and I bet some of you won't agree with me on that. But personally, I think the moblins seen in games like Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time, the very first Zelda, Link's Awakening, and the Oracle games aren't that strong. These are just not on the same level as a lot of other versions seen in other games. They are just too weak. They wouldn't stand a chance against the more powerful versions seen in the game, and that's mostly because their combat skills aren't up to the level that it needs to be. Their attacks are slow or predictable, they don't dodge any incoming attacks, and they have a limited amount of weapon choices. Well, except for the one in Breath of the Wild, but he's just clumsy. At the end of the day, it comes down to two versions seen in the 3D games and two versions seen in the 2D games. The moblins from A Link Between Worlds and the Minish Cap, and the ones from Skyward Sword and the Wind Waker. Now let's start by looking at the 2D moblins first. It's not really fair to compare 2D with 3D, so we're doing them separately. And we're starting with 2D because those are probably the easiest to analyze. Here we see both the spear and bow moblins, with one charging at Link and the other just shooting arrows. Now these aren't too strong, and that's mostly because they are predictable and don't put in a whole lot of effort when fighting. The ones carrying spears just charge at you mindlessly, which is easily countered and predicted, while the ones with bows just shoot and stand there. They don't even try to socially distance or something. So because of those reasons, they won't come too far. Sure, sometimes they can surprise you and they are tough, but most players can handle them, especially if you use other items to help you, like a bow or a boomerang, to keep them at a distance. So these aren't a big challenge, sadly enough. Sure, more of a fight than the version seen in the Oracle games, for example, but it's not enough. However, when it comes to A Link Between Worlds, it's a completely different story. These moblins are directly based on those from A Link to the Past. There are two types of them, one wielding a spear and another that's armored using a sword and shield. The first one might seem like a melee enemy, he throws his spears, and works slightly different compared to the version seen in A Link to the Past. They actually try to maintain distance between them and you, as they aim their javelins. So clearly, they are a lot smarter, and also more effective, while the other version is heavily armored with a main weapon and a shield, making them quite tough, as well as good at blocking hits. Now sure, they still charge, but overall they aren't as predictable or easy to dodge, and their shield makes them much harder to hit. So personally, I would say, when it comes to the 2D moblins seen in the Zelda franchise, that these ones are the strongest. They have the best gear, actually use tactics that make sense, sense, make it a lot harder for players in a good way, and they are tough. So A Link Between Worlds certainly wins here. However, now we are still left with one massive task. We need to take a look at the 3D games to find the winner there. And for these, we will look at Skyward Sword and The Wind Waker. Yes, I know. Again, Skyward Sword made the list of being among the toughest versions ever, even though I disliked the game. But to be honest, the motion controls in this game didn't make this enemy more skilled in combat at all. It has nothing to do with motion controls, unlike the moblins. Now first, the Wind Waker. Here they are often seen patrolling Ganon's territory, such as submarines, temples, and the Forsaken Fortress. There are two types of them, the brown and blue. The first one can take more hits and carries a lantern, which they throw at Link when they spot him, acting as a smokescreen of sorts, as well as to hurt him with the fire, while the blue moblins are weaker and do not carry a lantern. However, overall they are still big and powerful, but not very smart like all types. Now overall they have immense reach with their spears in this game, but they also injure others around them often. And when you do disarm them, they will keep fighting. They will unleash mighty, lightning-fast punches until they get a weapon again. Some may also punch Link in certain instances, followed by a spear attack, and they are also adept at handling a frontal assault by defending with their spears. So attacking from the sides or back is overall your best choice. So clearly they are tough as nails, and nothing scares them except explosives, which is kind of understandable and might even be a good thing. Overall, these moblins have quite good combat strategies, and can fight well even without weapons, and aren't completely stupid since they won't run into bombs, for example. So I would say that these moblins are quite strong, and certainly fit the elite status often given to 3D versions. However, while they are seasoned warriors with quite a lot of tricks up their sleeve, the Skyward Sword version also doesn't play around. Here we see a specific type known as the Shield Moblin, who looks like some sort of obese red monster. Looking a bit like a moblin to be honest, but not completely. And when it comes to these, there are two versions of them, one with a wooden shield and another with a metal shield. Both types carry large square-shaped shields they often use to defend themselves with, and are equipped with spears for the offensive. Overall, their shields are highly durable, and while it is possible to destroy a moblin's wooden shield, the same cannot be done against the metal shield variety. And so when you combine this insane defense and their crazy attack power, they become quite a strong elite enemy for sure. Now you can defeat them obviously, but they won't give up that easily as well. They are hard hitters and have an incredibly good defense. Especially when you take them on in locations where space is limited, it can be really hard to get behind them or even past them. Sometimes your only solution with them would be to run up their shields and run right over them. For example, when facing the ones that use metal shields. As you can imagine, a sword can't cut through that stuff at all. Sure, movies might make you believe that's possible, but believe me, it isn't. For example, in this video, another YouTuber called Jorgsprave shows this off perfectly. And I gotta tell you, this man is quite strong. So clearly the ones using metal shields are especially strong and would be hard to deal with. Link even struggles at times. However, out of these two, which one is the most powerful? Well, it kind of depends. Can the moblins from the Wind Waker deal with a version of themselves that doesn't really react to being hit, while also absorbing almost all of their hits with a shield? Well, personally, I think the moblins from the Wind Waker won't be able to deal with that kind of stuff. Especially if their opponent uses one of those metal shields. They just won't be able to handle it. In order to beat a foe like this, you would need to be relatively fast and also quite agile, since you need to strike an unprotected area. And as we all know by now, moblins aren't that smart, they are quite clumsy, and are certainly not that fast. So in a way, this is quite a good counter against them. The shield and insane coverage they provide makes it really hard to hit their foe, and while their weapon does have good reach, it doesn't necessarily make them better at striking past the shield. And so, because of that, I would say that the moblins from Skyward Sword win when it comes to the 3D games. I know, Skyward Sword wins again, but this time it's purely because of their tactics and weapons, who just counter the moblins from the Wind Waker in a lot of ways. However, I bet some of you won't agree with this, which is fine. So go tell me in the comments what you think, because who knows, you might know something that I didn't even think of. Hey you there, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to click the like button, check the videos in the upper right corner, and click subscribe and the bell so you won't miss anything. Yeehaw!